hot out here in the Middle East desert. Now listen up as I tell you a story of Colt, Tiny, Locke, and Agent Valkyrie as they uncover the secrets of the Phantoms in Mirror Manor in Tracking Shadows. I'm going to read you Chapter 1 as we explore this mystery. Chapter 1, The Prophet. 5 hours. Five long, uneventful hours under the blinding sun had turned up nothing but scurrying creatures and clouds of dust. The place was a ghost town. The roads were empty, and only the canvas coverings throughout the camp, blowing in the occasional breeze, brought any life to this desert. The wind and wildlife played tricks on Tiny's ear as he tried to detect a presence. Any movement at all inside the terrorist hideout, but nothing worth getting closer, at least not yet. Tiny kept his eyes downfield from where he was perched on the dune. How much longer is this going to take? The intel's normally so sharp. They couldn't be wrong about the transfer, could they? No, they wouldn't be. It was the surroundings making him think this. The climate was dry in Iran, heavy with heat, like you were inside an ever-baking oven. The gritty sand dug into and scratched his face like thousands of minuscule claws, peeling away at his skin, irritating and, more importantly, distracting. And the sun suffocated the air, choking him in its blistering heat as the burning rays beat against his body. Every inch of him was drenched in sweat. It soaked his clothes faster than the sun could dry them, as impossible as that seemed to Tiny. His canteen had been nearly empty for a couple hours by now, and he knew he wouldn't be able to refill it. He couldn't afford to take his eyes off the scene, but he needed to take a sip. Take your hands off the growing thirst, focus on the mission, and never finish your water. A wave of numbness hit from staying in the same position for too long. Don't move. Don't expose yourself at all. Whether it was a tingling sensation or a little boredom, Tiny ignored his inner commanding officer and minimized his movements as he slowly reached back to scratch his right leg. Better. Tiny inspected the makeshift camp about 200 meters from his position, well within range. It was a shabby circus of uneven walls and dancing tent flaps. It looked hastily constructed, like it had just sprung up around a few austere stone buildings that Tiny didn't know when or why they were built. Intelligence said the terrorists had claimed it recently as a border camp for any activity coming from Afghanistan and the East, and used it to relay contraband or human cargo from outside the country to their headquarters. By the looks of it, whatever came in here wouldn't be kept around for long. They didn't have the storage space or, more importantly for Tiny, the defensive capabilities to hold off an attack. They probably think no one would be crazy enough to attack their camp out here anyway. Good thing they don't know me. Life sprung into the camp below as real movement started kicking up. They were only isolated sources of that movement, but there was a frantic energy as a few bodies materialized out of the tents. Standing with rifles strapped to their shoulders by the mouth of the camp. Intel's right again. How could I have doubted the team? Tiny shook his head and smiled. Showtime. From a distance, 3 black dots entered Tiny's vision. As they came into view, he pointed the barrel of his M110 sniper rifle at the approaching party. Tiny hoped to just observe from up here for now since he was outnumbered and could not secure the cargo with a frontal assault. However, Tiny favored the sniper rifle as his reconnaissance tool of choice. Binoculars may be better for seeing larger fields up close, but the sniper rifle lets you magnify your vision with the potential to neutralize the target if things got out of hand. He always felt safer knowing that the option of fire was only a trigger finger away. The rolling caravan advanced into the camp. As figures exited the trucks, Tiny looked down the scope of his rifle, focusing on each face until he found out who he was looking for. The mastermind and local leader of the Al Ruya terrorist network, known only as the Prophet. His order had been clear. 1. Primary objective, secure the cargo. 2. Secondary objective 1, collect any intelligence on the organization. 3. Secondary objective 2, capture the Prophet alive for questioning. 4. Secondary objective 3, disable or destroy all hostiles. The Prophet was a high-value target who could be a source of information for many of the machinations of Al Ruya that were already underway or currently being planned. The opportunity to grab this caliber target didn't come around often, and Tiny wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. The Prophet was with a party of 8 soldiers, 2 of whom dragged a large white sack to the ground from the back of one of the trucks. The uneven package seemed to roll and twist in its burlap sack, worn with use and painted a shade between dark brown and maroon. Looks like the cargo's here too. Tiny stayed atop his eagle's nest and watched as the terrorists filed into the settlement, with the men hoisting the bag to their shoulders and carrying it inside. Tiny looked down at his watch. The sun's close to coming down completely, but what good am I doing out here? Better to take them unexpected, and it's dark enough already. He knew he couldn't wait long enough to allow them to flee with the cargo, and the sun was already mostly obscured by the rolling hills of the desert. He paused just long enough to allow him to assess whether any additional reinforcements were following the initial caravan, while also allowing the enemy to settle into their camp and fall into a false sense of security. After all, who would be stupid enough to attack them? As the desert descended into dusk, Tiny, with his M110 pointed at the camp and monitoring any movement within, made his way down the dune and away from the camp. Crawling in a prone position with his rifle downfield the whole way, he reached his jeep. He would need to embrace the shadows for his rescue mission. He stripped out of his desert khaki camouflage and opted for lighter wear and gear. An all-black tactical outfit to blend with the darkness. In exchange for the sniper rifle, a trusted Glock 19, enhanced with a silencer. The Glock 19 was a favorite of Tiny's because it was so versatile. A powerful weapon that could easily be concealed and modified for special scenarios. It was a jack of all trades that he liked when he first started using it in the Special Forces and was happy to keep using on missions now. As he approached the building on the outskirts of the camp, Tiny heard the staticky sound of a radio and voices. After waiting a minute trying to pick up any rogue words or phrases that might reveal the number of people in the camp or where the cargo is being held, he withdrew a fiber optic snake camera from his gear bag. He wrapped a lens around the outside of the apparent guardhouse and under the door to see inside. Two men with AK-47s slung around their chests were bent over a table playing cards. The radio was in the corner about 5 yards from them, all actively receiving communications from across the camp. Tiny knew rushing the door with force would alarm the whole camp and put him in danger with the guards. A frontal assault also risked the cargo being evacuated before he could secure it. Instead, he positioned himself in the shadows behind some ammo crates near the door and threw a rock against it. The play worked. The sound brought out one of the guards. He left the safety of the hut and took a few steps in Tiny's direction to look around, clearly confused about what he had heard. He eyed the empty encampment. Fortunately, the hapless guard swept right over Tiny when peeking around the corner of the building. As the guard turned to head back inside, Tiny lunged forward and wrapped his right forearm around the guard's windpipe, squelching any sounds and dragging him back to the side of the building. Draped in the shadows of the camp, Tiny's left arm reached into the sheath and pointed out his combat knife, and he stuck the guard until enough holes were punched into his frame that his entire body went limp. Tiny drifted down to one knee, and as he set the corpse against the side of the building. Tiny held his breath in anticipation of the other guard's movement in case his cover was blown from the takedown. Nothing. No sounds meant it wasn't. He positioned himself to see the remaining guards through the now open inside door inside the hut. The guard kept looking up from his spot, alert but unsure, before settling down again. After a minute, he called out his friend, and when no reply came, he made his way outside. As soon as the guard stepped out into the open, he looked around. When the guard turned his back on Tiny's hiding spot, Tiny rushed forward and in one fluid motion clamped one hand over the man's mouth as the other drew his blade across the throat of this guard, ending his life too. Tiny looked down at the still corpse now carpeting the ground. It's not my fault he chose the wrong line of work. With the outpost taken care of, time was critical before other camp residents were made aware of their fellow terrorist situation. Tiny rushed from one makeshift hut to another, confirming they were all empty. Nevertheless, he kept low and moved silently, eventually making his way to a long concrete structure that appeared to be the central building of the Al Ruya terrorist camp. Tiny could hear hurried activity within. He unfurled the snake cam again and set it up under the doorway. Through the camera's night vision lens, he could make out a handful of bodies convened under what appeared to be a sporadic lighting. Towards the back, he could make out the long, gaunt, and defined features of the Prophet, and the cargo beside him. Tiny wanted to get a closer look at the room's composition and get a definitive count on the number of guards inside, but the Prophet was making too many animated gestures. Tiny wasn't sure what was about to happen. This is taking too long. I can handle these guys. If I can't trust myself, who can I trust? Approaching the doorway, he retrieved the flashbang from his bag. Glock 19 in one hand and grenade in the other, he readied himself with a calming breath. He rolled the flashbang in, and in a blinding light and deafening crack erupted. He burst through the entrance to see disarray at the concussive explosion. Bodies doubled over, arms filling, blindly searching for weapons. Before he could fire at the immediate threats, who were still stunned from the blast, a hulking figure to the right of the doorway seemed less phased than his fellow terrorists and was lifting his rifle to Tiny's torso. Damn! There's my reward for rushing in. How could I have not checked to the sides of the door? Instincts took over, and Tiny bull rushed the guard before he finished aiming his weapon, chopped down on his arms and the barrel of the rifle, and then grappled with the man for control of the gun and his life. Seconds of pushing and pulling for control felt like hours, and Tiny wrestled free the rifle's grip enough to unload a barrage of bullets that mowed down the nearest terrorists that had started coming to their senses. Removing one of his hands from the struggle for the gun, the guard slipped out a blade and slashed Tiny in his side. After initially recoiling from the pain, Tiny quickly rebalanced and disarmed the blade from the opponent by squeezing the man's grip until it loosened, letting the knife bounce down to the concrete floor. Pulling out his own knife, Tiny plunged the blade into the heart of the terrorist with one firm thrust. The fight left the guard immediately, along with his life. 3 remaining men immediately near Tiny were now lucid and regaining their wits. Tiny took them out, in order, with shots to the temple. 1, 2, 3, all down and out. The cargo was in the rear corner of the open space, and so is the Prophet. The element of surprise was dissipating, and the rest of the guards were now readying their weapons, all pointed at the intruder. If Tiny didn't think fast, if he wasn't accurate and decisive, the balance of the battle could tilt in their favor. In a hurricane of activity, Tiny tipped over a desk and ducked behind it as a hail of bullets were unleashed his way. Splintering wood cracked and screamed as Tiny knelt beside his makeshift shield with a storm of shots underway. As soon as the temporary pause arrived with the sound of ammo clips being exchanged and reloaded, he dodged his way through the space, exchanging fire with the remaining guards. 1, 2, 3 more men discarded with bullets from Tiny's Glock 19, piercing their heads and bodies. Though the bunker was sparse, Tiny still found some cover behind a heavy trunk. He reached out and dispatched 2 more men safeguarding the Prophet and the cargo with shots to the center of their chests. With the men down, he came out from behind his cover and walked to the corner. Just the Prophet left, all alone. Suddenly, the sound of a metal rifle barrel rustling against fabric turned Tiny's head to the side as he saw that one of the last 2 guards he'd taken out was struggling to his feet despite being hit center mass. Tiny launched into a roll away from the revived foe as shots erupted into the bunker, now almost silent with death. As he came up with his Glock 19 in hand, he saw that the guard was pale and covered in sweat, staggering forward while struggling to hold up the barrel of his gun. The earlier wounds obviously affected him, and putting him down for good was easy. As his adrenaline began to ebb with only the Prophet remaining, Tiny's side began to pulse with a dull, throbbing pain, as the slash wound from the guard earlier made itself known again. Can't cut corners. You gotta be prepared or you're gonna keep getting hurt. Now close enough to his true target and not looking for a kill shot, he put away his gun and switched to his long, curved Bowie knife, still covered in the dark red blood of the terrorist he had taken out earlier in the night. Tiny was face to face with the Prophet, who stood motionless but whose frenzied eyes darted out of his grim, angular face to meet Tiny's. He didn't seem gripped by fear, but another wild emotion. His strong, wiry frame was tense and didn't match the activity of his eyes. "You know nothing yet," the Prophet yelled. "We are just the tip of the iceberg. Our new friends will elevate Aruya to rural over all. We will bring glory to God." The Prophet's mastery of English took Tiny aback. Tiny moved forward to restrain the Prophet. As he neared, the Prophet pulled out a blade hidden beneath his clothes. Seeing the steel flash into one of the naked light bulbs of the structure, Tiny jumped back and reflexively dropped his knife to reach for his Glock 19, putting 3 holes in the chest of the Prophet without hesitation. As the lifeless body fell to the floor, Tiny immediately regretted his action. Fuck! Objective failed. Tiny had trained his body to overcome his instinctive reflexes and look for a superior solution in moments like these. In this case, he could have disarmed his enemy and still brought the Prophet in alive to learn more about his organization and his new friends. He mentioned, instead, bullet holes in a cold body. "I better find something the team can use or Jupiter will not be happy. Well, less happy than usual. First comes the primary objective, secure the cargo. Before that, though, Tiny knew treating his knife wound would be worth the delay and could save him from further injury or death, though he needed to be quick. At the table, he retrieved his compact first aid kit. Tiny always tried to bring at least an ultra lightweight pack that could easily be carried on a mission, but its portability meant sacrificing some utility. He took out a small bottle of alcohol, a gauze pad, and a bandage, then cleaned and patched the slice on his side with a black dressing to maintain the camouflage. Tiny took a minute to clean his knife too. He preferred his Bowie survival knife to the combat knife issued when he was in the Rangers. It just feels right in the hand. Pulling the knife away, hopefully for the remainder of the mission, he returned his focus to the cargo. The package the 2 men carried from the truck earlier squirmed from within the burlap. As Tiny uncinched the sack and exposed its contents in the naked light, a blood-soaked face emerged with a disoriented look like another flashbang had just gone off. Never mind the beatings he had almost certainly been subjected to. "Rudolph Werner?" Tiny said. "Are you Rudolph Werner?" A nod, at least what he assumed was a nod, came back. Tiny released the captive from his ties. The man struggled to his feet, but as he began to stand, he fell forward and grabbed onto Tiny with both hands. "Damn! How long did they have him in that sack?" As Werner steadied himself and looked around the room, he finally spoke. "I was just on a community service vacation with my wife in Afghanistan. Where am I? Where's my wife?" the cargo asked. "Hell of a vacation. You were abducted by terrorists. Only you were taken and your wife is safe. I'll explain more in due time," Tiny said. You saved my life. How can I ever repay you? Werner asked. Let's get you safely out of here. That's all the payment I need, Tiny said. He radioed Base HQ to have a transport pick him up and Werner. Base used one of their camouflage cargo planes designed just for this type of clandestine activity, extraction and transportation. They still had plenty of time before they needed to head over to the airfield where the plane was arriving, so Tiny ordered Rudolph to stay put as Tiny performed a sweep of the camp to see if there was any intelligence to retrieve. Even though one of his secondary objectives had been thrown out the window, the others could still be achieved. The CIA had let it be known that any additional information on the Al Ruya organizational structure or its plans would be greatly appreciated, and Tiny knew that both the agency and Base would be interested in these new friends that the Prophet had warned of before his demise. What was he talking about? Who are these friends, and how will they help his band of terrorists? Only one way to find out. The camp managed to be both sparse and disorganized at the same time. Searching the areas of the main building, all he found were a few documents with scribbles and barely decipherable Arabic on them. One of them had a series of circles, some overlapping across the page, with just symbols along the bottoms of the circles. To Tiny, it looked like a diagram for astronomy. Over the years, Tiny developed a working knowledge of many languages, including Arabic, but these just seemed to be timetables and random illustrations. Not much use. Al Ruya had been careful not to leave a trace of their plans here. This camp was just a temporary post. They must have kept the most critical information elsewhere, or even off anything permanent or official. Nevertheless, Tiny would still recover all the intelligence that looked slightly important in case anyone at Base or their partner intelligence organizations could use it. The computer jockeys love it when you bring back a stack of random papers. Let's make their day. Returning to Werner in the bunker, Tiny thoroughly searched the Prophet's corpse. Patting down the billowy robes of the Prophet, there was nothing but his bony body protruding underneath and a concealed sheath for the knife. However, as Tiny worked his way down to the fabric slippers adorning the terrorist's feet, he saw a white slip in one of them. Removing and unfolding it, the paper seemed to describe an order. Scrawled in ink was a list of items that Tiny recognized as weapons and various types of explosive materials. Next to each of them was a quantity and a price, with the total sum of money for the whole order circled along the bottom of the paper. Across the top was just one word. Phantoms. Well, looky here. Are these your new friends, you terrorist scum? Looks like I'll need to do some digging into who these phantoms are. Tiny remembered he wasn't alone and looked up at his new companion. Werner was still shaking and staring down at his feet in complete silence. Hey, Rudolph, I have a favor to ask. Do you remember anything as your captor said when you were taken? And any names or information that might have seemed unusual, or even if it wasn't unusual, would be very helpful, Tiny asked. Werner stayed silent, gripping his hands so tight that the skin was turning a milky white around the edges of his fingers. His thumb shifted one over the other. After a moment, he looked up and said, No, not really. I don't remember much at all, to be honest. I don't speak their language, and I don't really remember any names. Okay, Rudolph, but any little piece of information could help. Maybe you heard them say the word phantoms in English at some point during the nightmare? Tiny said. At the mention of the word phantoms, Werner's eyes shot up at Tiny, then looked up to the ceiling as he squinted. Yes, I do remember that. I overheard them say a few times, always bunched together in conversation. That's great, Rudolph. Do you remember if they said anything else in English? Maybe a name or a city? Something else you recognize? Werner paused again for a second, looking down at his fidgeting hands. Then he made eye contact with Tiny. Yes, they definitely said the phrase mirror manor a couple times when talking about the phantoms. That's great work, Rudolph. This kind of intelligence can save lives. Now let's head over to my Jeep and get you over to the airfield on your way home, Tiny said. 2 hours later, the approaching plane sounded like music to Tiny's ears. There wasn't much to see on its outside. It looked like any run-of-the-mill shipping plane you might find in the airways. Inside, however, Tiny removed a panel in the cabin to reveal a hidden keypad. Punching in 82365110, Tiny watched the textured painting of 2 stacks of crates slide apart, revealing a secret section of the plane. The technical oasis on the other side, on the otherwise nondescript plane, was wallpapered with screens and terminals alight with activity, world maps, weather gauges, and an array of communication equipment, much like in a pilot's cockpit. Tiny secured Werner and himself into the comfortable leather seats by these screens and dialed Base HQ. Within seconds, a face appeared on the screen, which let out a curt, "Is the package secured?" Tiny gave him a thumbs up. "Did you secure the secondary package?" "No, though don't worry, Jupiter. It won't be turning up on anyone's doorstep again. I took some receipts, but I don't know if they'll be of much use." "Okay, get your ass back to HQ for a full debrief." "There was one thing to mention before then. Have you heard of the Phantoms? One of the receipts mentioned the name, but I haven't heard of them. Or it. Rings a bell. While you're flying back, I'll do some digging on my end, and we can discuss more at headquarters." The eyes on the screen flashed to Tiny's side, where Rudolph sat huddled over the apparent meditation in private. And with that, Tiny spent the rest of the fight contemplating the day's events in his head. What he did right, and what he might not want to do again. As if to applaud his decision for this review, he felt his side throb again where he was stabbed. Why did you race in without a full sweep of the area? Did that lead to you rushing to action and shooting the prophet? Did you not trust yourself to disarm him? Now you've let the team down at the cost of a secondary objective by extinguishing your target instead of apprehending him. That's information and ultimately lives you may have lost. Tiny shook his head. During his years in the military, an appreciation for the power of patience was a key lesson. You need to stay on mission and not be distracted. You needed to assess the options without emotion. At the same time, there was that need to always be ready for action at the drop of a hat. Action was inevitable. When it came, you needed to react on instinct. In this line of work, instinct could save you, but patience was required. Otherwise, you could be killed or get others injured. An operation for the Army Rangers would involve countless hours of preparation and waiting for that perfect moment to strike. Despite the best efforts of his superiors and trainers, patience was never Tiny's strongest quality. The impatience was one of the key drivers in his decision to leave the Special Forces and join the private sector. 4 years later, he still hadn't mastered the art of patience, and he knew it. That's how he ended up here with BASE, Bold Alliance for Strategic Espionage, an agency that worked in tandem with government intelligence organizations, as well as prominent individuals and companies around the world. At BASE, he had all the excitement and purpose of his Ranger days, but with vast resources to accelerate the pace further. Though as he removed the bandage from his torso for a look, he realized today was testing whether that was a good thing or not.